Yes, anyway, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for coming along this evening to talk about service workers. And I'm excited to see the thing about CMS as well. I can't wait for that later. But first, yes, thank you for the introduction. My name is Phil Nash. You can find me online pretty much anywhere as Phil Nash. So please do come find me in. It's going to be one of those evenings, isn't it? All right, cool. Let's get on to service workers instead of just laughing at me. Cool. I'll start with a quick introduction to service workers. This is what I think they are. A service worker is a script, JavaScript normally, that intercepts network requests so that web developers like ourselves can treat the network as an enhancement and provide offline experiences for users of web applications. Fairly simple, right? Yeah. I like that. But you probably wanted a longer introduction than that. So let's talk a bit about XMLHttpRequest. My favorite web API, I think. I think not just because of its weird capitalization, of course. Like, that is, why are the T's and P's not, I don't, it doesn't make, could make the H smaller? I don't know, whatever. But this API, I believe, changed the web, right? I don't think we could imagine the web these days without the ability to change and make content appear, disappear, and change on a page without reloading. And I thank those engineers that were working, I believe, on the Outlook for Web client when they went to the Internet Explorer team and said, we just want to change something on the page without reloading. And all of that turned into this wonderful API that we've wrapped so many times and turned into so many different libraries, but changed the web. And I believe that in the future, much like XML/HttpRequest right now, much like Ajax right now, in the future, we're going to wonder how we ever built a modern website without a service worker. And for the rest of this talk, I'm going to try and prove to you why that is. So let's talk about the birth of the service worker. Has anybody used one of these before? The application cache. Yes. How was, no, there's already a shaking of that. I didn't even ask. PTSD right there. Horrific, right? I mean, it looks simple. It's a nice declarative format to say, in this page, I want to save my app CSS and my app JavaScript offline. And then the next time the browser asks for it, it's just there in the cache, waiting, ready. And that's fine. That was easy. It's just if you wanted to do anything more complicated than that, it was almost impossible. So impossible, so popular this was that it was roundly called a douchebag a number of times by Jake Archibald, from the Google DevRel team. But he didn't just abuse it in talks and blog posts. He actually decided to do something about it. And so with Alex Russell, also of Google, they decided to get working on something to replace the application cache. And so the service worker spec was born. It was first pushed up to GitHub back in early 2014. So this has actually been quite a while in the making these days. And you can go check it out there if you want to read specs. Some people enjoy that, I think. And then in early 2015, it dropped into browsers for the first time. And I don't mean behind flags. It became a real thing back in Chrome 40 and Opera 27. And that was followed by other browsers, Firefox 44 in early 2016. Yes. And then Samsung Internet 4, which you might recognize if you have a Samsung phone or have decided to look for other browsers on your Android these days. It's actually, if you're not thinking about Samsung Internet, it's the third biggest mobile browser in the world. So probably worth considering. Of course, we're missing two logos here. But this is the most positive slide of the entire presentation now, because service workers are in Edge 17, which is kind of in preview. It's almost launched, sort of there. And service workers are in Safari on iOS 11.3 and macOS 13.4, both in beta right now and coming out soon. So before the end of the year, in fact, probably by the end of the half year or even the next couple of months, we will have service workers in every browser or every major browser across the spectrum. And I am just super excited about that because nobody can claim that there's no point in doing it because these browsers aren't ready for it. I mean, I always tell you it's an enhancement. This is going to make your website better for the people that can use it, and it will be better in the future when the other browsers come along to use it. But they're coming along to use it now, so so exciting. But what does it really do? Let's see some code, right? We want to see how it actually works. for the 3 people who put up their hands, you've already written this line of code before, and that's cool. So service workers are a bit of JavaScript that runs in the background. So from our page, we have to actually register it and install that service worker. And it's just this simple line. We can make it a little bit more complicated by giving a scope to the service worker. By default, the scope is the level at which the service worker lives. So in this case, at /swjs, it would be for the entire website. But you can scope it just to say /admin. And this just means the path which the service worker has control over. We can drop the scope for now. Service workers love promises. We're going to see promises all over the place. And if the service worker registers successfully, then the promise will resolve successfully. And if it doesn't, you can catch it and work out what happened. Notably, you can't just put emojis in JavaScript like this. I just like it. I think it looks good. And 2 beers is always a good thing when a service worker registers. And then in the service worker JavaScript itself, you can listen for events. That's what happens. It's an event-driven piece of code. In this case, the fetch event, which happens when you navigate or load any kind of content from the page. So it's a proxy, basically. The service worker is a bit of JavaScript that lives in the browser and is a proxy under your control. Of course, lives in the browser and JavaScript and proxy all sound like something kind of dangerous. So you might wonder, like, if somebody else gets hold of this proxy, you never see your users again. And they don't even know about it, which is terrifying. Which is why the service worker is scoped to only work on secure sites, on HTTPS. Which is why it's a good thing that HTTPS is now free and available for everybody, and Go use Let's Encrypt, and that's pretty cool. It does work on localhost, though, so you don't have to mess about with self-signing certificates or anything like that. So let's show you a service worker. Let's go build something very quickly. Over here, I have a web page. It's not loaded. Yeah, cool, it's offline. That's a good start. Now it's online. Cool. And what I'm going to do is make it such that that page never goes away. We're going to turn it offline. So right now, as you can see in the right-hand side, in my DevTools, I have the service workers, the application tab open in Chrome DevTools. And this would show us our service workers if we had any. We do not right now. So let's go and build them. This is that HTML from the page. And I'm just going to, down at the bottom here, register for my service worker. I'm going to do service worker, not register. And my one is going to live at swjs, like in the thing. And then if it registers, we actually get the registration object, which you can use for other things later. But right now, I'm just going to log. Yay. And then if things don't go so well, I probably want to know about it because I've done something wrong. Cool. That's all we need to register our service worker. So let's build our service worker. It lives in this file right now, which is empty. I showed you the fetch event in the slides there, but the first event that actually fires for the service worker, which inside its own file is called self, is the install event. And that event happens as you call that register. And it allows us to do some early work, so setting up the service worker for later success. Since we have some work to do, we're going to tell the service worker to wait. Because the service worker is event-driven and is intended to live fairly quietly in the background and certainly not do anything when the website's not really available, it can be killed at any time by the browser. If we want it to do some stuff, then we have to tell it to wait. And this wait until method on the event takes a promise. And once the promise finally rejects or resolves, the service worker then gives up and says, OK, you can kill me if you want to. Inside this thing, we're going to call on the new caches API. And we're going to open up a new cache called the Web Meetup. And that, as I said, service workers love promises. So that's going to return a promise. And when that resolves, we'll have a cache, which is called the Web Meetup. And inside that cache, we can go and add some files. We can use add, which adds single files at a time. Or add all, so we can put a bunch in one request. And so for this particular app, I'm just going to put my index.html file and the app.css file. It's a bit grand calling it app.css. It's one page, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. So that's installed it. And when the service worker installs, it's going to run this, cache those 2 files, and then success. We're going to get the log on the page to say that the service worker is installed. We need to do one other thing, though, because we can put those things in the cache, but we need to go and get them again later if we're actually going to do anything with this. So this is where we start listening to that fetch event. And in this case, rather than telling the event to wait, because it's fetch, we actually want to tell it to respond with something. Again, respond with, at this point, takes either a promise or a request object as the argument. Because you can actually create a new request here, fill it with some data, and return that straight away. We can fabricate things inside the service worker, which is kind of cool, but this would be pretty useless because any request would just get hello. So I'm going to instead pass a promise to it by opening up the cache again, opening up the Web Meetup cache. And then when that works, we'll get that cache. I'm going to try and match the incoming request to the cache. So this looks at things like the request method, the URL that was requested, and in this particular case, I know very well that the website only loads 2 files. Those 2 files I already cached, and so this will succeed. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to refresh this page, and what that should see, as you can see on the right-hand side there, is that we have installed a service worker. And indeed, if we look in the cache storage at none of my practice attempts, but the real one, we can see there's an app CSS and an index.html in there. So this means it's all offline, and I can go and close this server, kill that, reload the page, and I promise you I'm reloading, and it's all still there. So that is our first offline page. It's completely offline, and you can't really save it from this point, but we'd need a new service worker for that. But that is our very first offline page. So why would we be interested in this, of course? Why is this important? Because to me, this is kind of that argument of web versus native. And I know this argument has been had many times across the web. This is my personal version of it, if you'll indulge me. I think there's kind of 2 properties that are important between the two in this particular case. The web is online by default. Everybody understands that you put a URL in a browser, it goes and fetches the contents, and you see a website. That's exactly how people expect the web to work. Native, on the other hand, is offline by default. You go to a store, you download all the files that you need to run a native application, and you kind of expect them to be able to run when they're there. The web, on the other hand, is discoverable. We have links, we can share, we can search, all of that kind of thing. Probably the reason that we like the web, and the reason it exists in the first place is the hyperlink. That discoverability and the fact that it's at the end of a touch or a click is a new website and a new experience is just a superpower to the web. Whereas native applications are gated by an App Store installation. A horrific experience, if you'll agree. And I don't know when the last time I actually downloaded and used a new app was, because I don't feel like I need to anymore. I have all my apps. I'm good. So the thing is, if we can turn this online by default off, if we can make that something else, if we can make it offline first, if we can make web applications work and have the same feeling that you have if you've downloaded a native application, the feeling that if you go to it, it will load, it will have useful content for you, then I think the web kind of wins. And we have some other APIs, some other kind of native capabilities to catch up on, but other than that, for most things in the world, you no longer need an app if we can make this possible. But maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you're not worried about native applications. Maybe there's other things that you care about. I think service workers can help you with that kind of thing too. Performance, for example. Maybe not on the first page load, like that's still a website downloading. But once you've cached some of these files offline, that's a cache you can trust, you can understand a little bit more than I think the HTTP cache, which is as flaky as the browser lets it be. But you know those files are in that cache. So the next time you load the page, those files are instant. They're there. When I run the web page test against my personal website, which currently caches the files offline, the first render takes a second or so. The second render takes about 0.13 seconds. It's great because it's like the time to first byte was 1.1 seconds, but you were rendering at 0.13. It's wonderful, it's snappy, it's quick, it's there. You could just deal with some fallbacks though. Maybe you don't want to build a whole application that's going to work on and offline, but you do want to be able to not provide a jumping dinosaur game to your users if they happen to go offline. I like the dinosaur game as much as everybody else, but I'd really rather never see it. One of the best experiments with this, I thought, and I think it's gone off the web now, was the Guardian team in the UK, who, when their users went offline for a while, ended up with a crossword that they could fill in, which I thought was just delightful. It's particularly because, you know, if they're commuters or whatever, they're just checking the news on the way into work, and maybe they go through a tunnel. They're not going to go to some other website. They're already offline. This way, the Guardian keeps them on the page and actually interested, and it's a nice experience. As I say, I don't think this exists anymore, but it was a really good experiment. And then there's push notifications. Push notifications are an amazing way to reconnect with users. Sometimes they're a horrible way to piss users off. But if used well, they can be a great way to connect with users. And I have a demo for that right now, actually. I have push notifications. What do I have? I'm going to enable push notifications here. Doesn't seem, no, it's off. It's this side. Let's start that one up. Bring that back. Okay, I can enable push notifications here, and that's going to give me a permissions dialog. Do not ever show that permissions dialog on page load. No one wants to see that. No one wants push notifications from a website they just arrived at. But they might want it from your website once it's happened. So I'm just going to send myself a quick message here so I remind myself of the number I have to text back. Yeah, I have that message. All right, cool. So did I close that? No, I'm going to close that. That's cool. I don't need that anymore. But what you can see here is that's a message I just sent. I'm going to send one back just to say, hello, push notification. If I send that back, that's going through the Twilio API eventually in the middle. But what's going to happen is it's going to trigger a push event in the service worker, much like the fetch one, which is then going to actually go fetch some more data off the server and put it in the notification. And this is the point where it appears, or I give up very quickly. All right, it's going to be like that, is it? Let's keep it loaded and just try one more. This is where it turns out I didn't start that bit. That's fine. All right, I know what I did now. I'm going to close that. Send one more. This time we're going to get a notification because I actually turned on all the services that I needed to get the response. Or not. Should have worked. Oh well. I can also trigger these things from the DevTools, which is quite cool because that's good for testing without sending too many text messages. So if I push that, the whole thing's broken. That's cool. All right, brilliant. We'll move on then. Push notification doesn't have quite as good a support as actual service workers in general. They're just slightly different. And so it took till Chrome 42 before they supported it. And actually the spec has changed quite a lot since then, but we're at a good stable state now. Firefox launched with it in version 44 and Opera took till version 37, a good 10 versions after they announced the first service worker. Samsung Internet did it at version 4, and Edge will be launching with push notification support as well, but not Safari. Apple have their own push stuff, and I'm sure they've got some problems and things to work out internally before they get there. As I said, with great power comes great responsibility. Don't piss the users off. The thing about this is that if you go and turn all notifications off in a browser, you can turn all notifications off, which actually ruins the browser for anybody, ruins it for everybody, every other website that's actually trying to do a good job of push notifications. So don't do that. It's not cool. Background sync is another fantastic little feature of the service worker because, you know, like the push notifications, now we have this little JavaScript running in the background. It can do other stuff for us. It's not just an arbiter of a cache. It can do other stuff. So background sync is great because it means when you're offline and you try and do something, normally that just fails, right? You get a blank page or a dinosaur or something. But if with background sync, we can save that for later, register for a sync event, and then when the browser comes back online, it will go and do that thing for you. I'm going to show this. Hopefully this one works. It's going to be awkward if it doesn't. I'm going to go to this new message page here. That's a call from the 90s there. All right. Who knew? I'm gonna send a message to myself. In fact, what I'm gonna do is go off the Wi-Fi. That's the key here. We go off the Wi-Fi, and so I can send myself a message saying, hello from offline. And I can press send on that, and the thing at the bottom says message sent, but that's really a lie. What it's done is it's thought about it and said, no, I won't, not yet, I'm not online. But if I then turn the Wi-Fi back on, and we reconnect to the, and I can close that tab, I don't need that. Reconnect to the Zendesk Wi-Fi, it's gonna realize it's online again, it's gonna send that back to the server, and yes, this one did work. So it sends it back off to the server and completes the request. I think that's incredibly powerful and something we've not had any access to on the web up until now. So I hope you're excited like that about that as well as me. So excited I can't even use words anymore. This one is only available in Chrome since version 49 and Samsung since version 5.4, I believe. It might be coming in. No, I'm not sure about whether it's coming in Edge or not. But it's not in the others. Firefox are working on it. I have no idea about Opera. They don't really publish that as far as I can see. And this all leads on eventually to progressive web apps. Now, have you heard this term, progressive web apps, right? Yeah, there's quite a few people. Progressive web apps, really, I think the service worker is really the base of all progressive web apps. But, I mean, it is. It requires that offline experience, HTTPS. Also a web manifest file, so this just describes some icons and colors and things like that, which is pretty useful to have and quite easy to write. And then some user engagement. Now, the browser can change its mind what this means, but user engagement has been using more than one page in like a space of 5 minutes. And when you get all of those things together, you get the app install banner. Cheers, celebrating fireworks. I don't have an Android phone on me right now, but this is a screenshot of what that would look like, where it comes up at the bottom and says, hey, you seem to be using this app. Do you want to add it to your home screen? Yes, and that's what we're getting, right? And you get the icon on the home screen.
That's what I was dreaming this.
Yes.
I was dreaming for this option to be available.
And that's it, right? You don't get to choose when it happens. You have to wait for that user engagement to kick in. But you get the icon on the home screen. You look like a real app, and profit. That's what you're after, right? It's what we wanted. So that's service workers. Like, they power the progressive web apps. They're powering the future of the web for us. And as I said at the start, they are these scripts that intersect these network requests, although we know they do more than that now, so that we can treat the network as an enhancement. And I'm very glad I don't have to care about the network anymore. Things will get done eventually. And I said they could provide this offline experience for user web applications, but I'm not exactly sure about that anymore, because it's not just about being offline. There's a whole bunch of stuff to this. In fact, I just reckon that service workers and progressive web apps in general allow us to provide better experiences for users of web applications. And hopefully that's what we're all working for day to day. And so that's why I think in the future, we'll wonder how we cope without service workers. But if you're still not convinced, I have one last little thing to show you, which hopefully the sound is still working for. Yes.
For too long, users have been left staring at a white screen. For too long, they've been let down by the cruel seas of network connectivity. And for too long, we've been powerless to help. We've been left waiting. But no longer. A new browser feature has arrived. A total game changer. A feature that lets you control the network rather than letting the network control you. Who is this new feature? And what promises does it bring? Introducing the service worker.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's the service worker. Thank you very much. My name's Nash.